Hello and welcome to Business Today Television and the India Today Group studio here at the World Economic Forum at Davos. With me, two representatives from industry. Honeywell, one of the oldest and storied names, an industrial conglomerate which produces God knows how many products which touch our lives daily. Mr. Ben Driggs, the president of Global High Growth Regions for the company, and also Rajan Bharti Mittal, Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Bharti Enterprises, which is a company not just known in India, but has taken the Indian low-cost telecom model overseas, including Africa. Thank you very much for your time with us. The President of High Growth Regions, and that portfolio includes India. And Ben, great to have you here to talk about how your company and how global business is looking at India at a time when majority of global CEOs seem to be pessimistic about the global economy and are worried about the possibilities of recession. But no one in India is talking that word.
Well, we're very optimistic about India. We've had a long presence in India for a very long time, well over 12,000 employees, strong presence. But what to me is so exciting in my trips to India recently is you have a convergence of wonderful set of infrastructure projects, which is really helping the country go forward. You have very innovative companies, big companies, small companies, the startup environment incredibly strong. And all of that leads to, I think, an excellent economic outlook for the country in the long term. And generally, when we look around the globe, obviously the macroeconomic circumstances are uncertain. But a couple of the industries which Honeywell is very involved in, aviation, in energy, both on the classic sort of fuels and renewable and cleaner forms of fuels. Those are verticals that have excellent headwinds in India. And when you look at trends that we play in, like digitalization, those are very strong in almost any economic conditions in India as well as globally. So we remain optimistic about India, and we actually remain optimistic about the segments that we serve in the economy.
Since you spoke about airports, still recently, if you had spoken about headwinds at Indian airports, the flyers who were stuck in long lines would have said something else. Rajan, great to have you back, and you've been here interacting with not just Indian counterparts, but people across the globe. Last year, summer, record optimism coming out of COVID right from Davos, and now record pessimism on the global side. Explain that to our viewers.
I think when we see around the world, yes, there seems to be a slowdown. For sure, one cannot ignore that. There is a recession. Europe is struggling. US is slowed down. China is recovering, I have to say, once again after the COVID policy has been changed. India still remains a bright spot. There is no doubt in my mind, even when we saw in May. But even more than May sit, as I see here in last almost 3 days that I've interacted with global leaders and policymakers, India seems to be having an opportunity where we believe that with all that is going around the globe, with geopolitics between, US-China relationships on one side, supply chain breaking on the other side due to the war, India started looking a place where people will want to say the story of China plus one is not turning on its head if we can do it well as India, is that India is a must on the list. I mean, I hear Honeywell's position that India being one of the large markets, and when global leaders like themselves have endorsed India, I think it's working well. My belief is that this is going to remain a challenging time. It's not that it's happening or going in a hurry. India will also get some bit of heat. After all, the world is interconnected today. That's likely to happen. But our internal consumption is helping us. Our fiscal policies that have been put across is helping us. And more so over the government policies of the last years and now fructifying and really now edging on manufacturing, promoting more services. I think over a period of time we will see that India's story remains robust.
Yeah. Ben, high growth regions, apart from India, what's part of your portfolio? And the reason I ask you this is that it would tell our viewers how you look at the growth dynamics, particularly for our economy.
Sure. High growth regions is the term that Honeywell uses for the emerging markets. And we don't call them the emerging markets because they're already a significant portion of our revenue. They've already emerged. But we look at that. So Southeast Asia is another area that continues to do well. I agree with what was said about China with the change in policy. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism, especially in the second half of the year. Middle East and North Africa, another region which is experiencing some very nice growth. And you look at Latin America. In Latin America, again, a lot of the commodities and other things that the world needs certainly exist there. So we think throughout the emerging markets there is good opportunities for growth. India is certainly a bright spot, Southeast Asia a bright spot, Middle East. And again, I think the reopening of China creates some real opportunities there, especially if you look beyond quarter one.
Yes, looking beyond quarter one is very important. Before I go to Rajan, a quick comment about supply side disruptions that have impacted pretty much every company. In India, consumers, even in the smallest cities, have had to wait months for cars. Unimaginable. No one ever thought this would happen. As someone who sort of has an overview of this, how good or bad is the supply side situation right now?
Well, I think it's improving, but there's a lot of room to go.
Okay.
It is. I wouldn't expect easy fixes. Things don't get perfect overnight. But I think the situation is steadily improving. We have 3 manufacturing sites in India, and we see those manufacturing sites are critical for our strategy. And we see at those sites and our sites around the globe, things are improving. But again, the expectation shouldn't be for an overnight fix. These are issues in the supply chain that require the whole value chain down to tier 3 suppliers and on up to improve and to be ready to meet the demand that exists. But I think we're certainly on the right road.
Rajan, Ben represents inward sort of investment outlook into India. A lot of people know that Bharti is also an investor out of India. How does the change global macro backdrop impact you? For example, your group also has a sort of allied investment into the satellite communication space. Tell our viewers about how an Indian company looks at the global downturn.
As there are challenges, and it also works both ways, the inward and outward commitments. But we are seeing Africa is a growing continent where we went few years back. It is growing. Of course, the challenges remain on commodity pricing. Challenging remains on currencies. Those challenges remain. Yet, it's a continent which is growing. Now, satellite is another venture that OneWeb that we have started doing it, and we just shot a few more satellites in the sky, which will be done by March. That will connect the whole world and unconnected people at places where the traditional networks, terrestrial networks, will never reach.
Often, can you recall the number of satellites that are already up?
So we are, out of 648, we are almost up at 560 satellites are already up. We're covering 80% of the 20% is left. Unfortunately, it would have been done by now, barring the war stepped in last year and all the satellite launches out of that place were, stymied.
1998 or 1999, the ITU at Geneva, not far from here, and you had several satellite companies, Global-Sat, Thuraya and others. That satellite communication revolution never happened. What gives you the confidence it's going to happen now, almost 30 years down the line?
You're right. We've seen that earlier bit, but things have changed. One, this is a LEO constellation, which is much more in terms of latency and much more availability, which remains. So, and we are seeing 2 or 3 other satellite companies which is already coming in. So there's a new business model which is also created because the terrestrial networks are there, which will eventually connect to the satellites also. So things have changed. After all, innovation, technology, if you look at 98 and you look at 2023, if you look at technology, the world has changed and is ahead and is ever going and ever.
Will those satellite handsets be the same clunky ones with long antennas that we saw then?
No, eventually your handset will actually, if wherever you will not get the terrestrial network, will actually get it. If you see today on your iPhone, if you are in a basement where there is no network, there is an icon of a satellite which comes there. By now, it is only allowing you to make an SOS call. But eventually, it will get connected to the world that you will need for broadband, for your other needs.
On Android as well?
Yes, of course, of course.
Okay, I'll look forward to that. Ben, an Indian company doing this. Does this represent the Indian prowess in telecom and technology?
No, I think it absolutely does. When we look at our partners in our supply base in India, it's incredibly strong. I'll give you just a couple of examples. In 2022, we announced that Naveen Floorings, a great chemical manufacturer, would actually manufacture Honeywell's best environmental refrigerant gas in India. And we had confidence in the Indian companies to be able to produce this at a world-class level. Even in the aerospace sector, we look and there's some phenomenal suppliers. HAL, government company, but has done a phenomenal job building Honeywell's engines, our TPE 331, where we provide the core technology and they actually build the engines in India. So those are just a couple of sort of large examples outside of the classic examples of sort of high tech and other things that we all know in India. But we view as those are just two examples of strong partners in chemical and aerospace that also have global capabilities. And so for us, there's tremendous promise in India.
I follow up on that. For years, we were told as reporters that China was the manufacturing capital of the world. India would be services. Over the last several years, companies and now a policy push for manufacturing within India. How does the China-India equation square up when it comes to manufacturing capability?
Well, at Honeywell, we've always had the philosophy of you need not just one center, but you need regional hubs. And India, again, we started manufacturing in India long ago. We have 3 sites. And I think when you really think about it, you have to look at an effective, resilient supply chain that does have numerous nodes, numerous locations. And we certainly have had, been very happy with our Indian manufacturing operations.
I'm glad you said that. Rajan, as we close this conversation, I want to turn our attention back to telecom, unless you have some other topic with you. I want to talk about 5G. Right here, Ericsson's CTO said India is already a leader when it comes to 5G deployment, and that's going to increase, and we'll have a significant share of the total subscribers expected. How is 5G panning out in India according to you? What's the progress? What more would you like to see?
Before I go on 5G, just to pick up what was said about China.
Yeah, sure.
For a small bit. It's always known that China was the factory of the world. We've heard that and we have seen that. And US particularly is really the knowledge, innovations, hub, center of the world. India can play a great balancing role, be a manufacturing base, as I said, that it's not only one, you need regional hubs. And also with all our knowledge, innovation, the startup, India can play that balancing role for the world at large. On 5G, this will be probably, I would say, one of the largest rollouts in a country and a quickest rollout. We are already rolled out in many cities. By December 23, majority of the cities, urban areas will be covered by 5G. It's very rapidly progressing. And by 24 we'll be covering the entire country. So between the two networks that you see, the coverage has started taking shape at a very rapid pace. And we will see the results, because for a country like India, which has gone very heavily set on digitization, on healthcare, on government services, on food supply, those things will help them immensely. The only issue that we are facing today is really the shortage of the devices, shortage of the networks because of the supply chains being broken, the chipsets being such a, but I'm to assume that within the year we will try to cover up the backlog that it is.
Yeah. Ben, on that point, last point, does India have an opportunity in semiconductors?
Semiconductor is not a place where we really play, except for some of our material going in. So I don't know if I can comment on that. But again, what I would say is innovation in India is not just one area, but is in many areas. And so I think that is the way to sort of think about the Indian economy going forward, as was mentioned. And again, I think India has a very excellent opportunity with some very solid policies and push going forward, I think, to be successful in many areas.
We have had here a mini version of the US-India CEO's council, Indian CEO, American business leader, talking about the potential that this country has. Yet there are a lot of things that will need to be done right. They've spoken about the brighter side of the outlook. The sun has gone down, viewers, I can tell you, and the temperatures are plummeting again. So I'm going to let both my guests go and thank them for their time. Ben, wonderful to have you. Rajan, glad that I had you back. With that, it's a wrap on this conversation. We'll be back with more. Do stay tuned in. Goodbye.